Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Arena of Aurethious podcast, episode number 2. We're doing it a little bit different today. We're actually doing this live on Twitch as we're recording here. A little bit of a scheduling conflict came up this week, so the only time to really do it was during my normal stream time on Mondays. So here we are. If we've got people who are in Twitch chat hanging out and they want to, comment on anything that we're talking about, or ask questions, feel free. Otherwise, we're gonna roll on with the conversation. And today we're gonna be focusing on the NFL playoffs and a lot on the demise of the New England Patriots 2021 season. So we're just gonna get right into it. No sense in pulling the Band-Aid off slowly here. So on Saturday, so as for reference, if you're listening to this after the fact, we're recording this on Monday, January 17th. So all of the wild card round games have been played with the exception of tonight's game between the Cardinals and the Rams. So, like I said, we're going to focus a lot on the Patriots because that's my home team, and I watched all of that unfortunate game, but we're going to hit on some of the other stuff as well. But just as a reference, obviously, if you're listening to this and you wonder, wait, what about the Cardinals and the Rams? Game hasn't been played yet. So, getting to the Patriots, they got annihilated by the Bills. 37-17, I think, was the final. And the game wasn't even as close as that final score might indicate. It was just a disaster from beginning to end. And when it comes down to it, you're not going to win many games in the NFL when you cannot stop the other team's offense at all. The Bills not only scored, but scored touchdowns on every single possession that they had the ball, except for, I think, the end of the game when they kneeled down to run out the clock. I don't remember if they had the ball at the end of the first half or not, but it was bad. It was pretty bad. And, I mean, there's really not a whole lot to unpack specifically with the game. But I think the things to focus on are, first and foremost, the defense, obviously, because when you have a game like that where it was basically a perfect game for the Bills offense, Josh Allen almost had a perfect quarterback rating. Again, you didn't force them to punt at all. Not only did you not force them to punt at all, that's 2 games in a row against the Bills that the Patriots did not force a punt on defense. And I feel like that's got to be unheard of. I don't know. I didn't look into it to see if that's ever happened but that shouldn't happen to a team in the playoffs. If you're a playoff team, you should be able to at least force someone to punt once, at least. It's just, I don't know. It's unbelievable when you look at it. Eight straight quarters against the Bills, and they couldn't force a punt once on defense. They just couldn't get off the field. And I think that's one of the big takeaways from the season, where statistically their defense was very good. They were, I believe, a top 5 defense in, was it scoring? I don't know if it was scoring or I don't think it was yardage. It might have been both. But that was one of those situations where I think numbers don't tell the story, because that was not a top 5 defense. I mean, that certainly was not a top 5 defense that took the field on Saturday in Buffalo at all. And I think their defense over the course of the season was a little overrated. And again, the stats make it seem like that's not the case, but you look at the 2 games with the Bills, the playoff game, and the 2 of the 3, the second Bills game where they didn't force a punt. There were at least 3 or 4 other games where you were within a score and all you needed to do was make a stop on defense and give your offense a chance to get the ball back and try and do something with it, and they couldn't do it. And it wasn't against great teams that they were doing some of these against. we had that Bills game where the regular season Bills game where they lost. They fought back into that game somehow, had a chance, but they just couldn't get off the field. I believe the first week in Miami where they were going in for a score and they fumbled, I believe it was the same situation where if the defense could have stopped Miami, they could have got the ball back and had another try at it. I could be wrong about that. The second game against Miami, that was a situation where they had a chance at the end, but the defense couldn't give the offense a chance. Indianapolis was another one. There's at least one other one that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head where, within a score of either tying or taking the lead, and your defense just can't make a stop when you need to. And that was one of the big feelings for me. The stories for this season with this defense was they had that 7-game winning streak, and everybody was talking about how great their defense was, and the defense played very well during that 7 games. But I think that was a bit of fool's gold, where first of all, their schedule was not great this year as far as strength of schedule. So I think you ran into a situation where they fed on some bad teams. I know the Jets were in that. The Titans, who are a good team, but they were decimated the week the Patriots played them with injuries. So that was not the Titans team that's going to take the field next week. So I mean, I think that's a big part of they kind of inflated their numbers during that winning streak. And then for whatever reason, and this goes for most of the team, is they just kind of fell off at the end of the year. But again, I think the big focus has to be one of the big focuses has to be on the defense because again, while the numbers said that they were good, the eye test shows otherwise. You look at, again, all you need is a stop to give your team a chance at the end of the game, and you can't do it. Elite defenses don't do that, and this was not an elite defense. So that brings up questions as to where the defense goes. Is that were they just not talented enough on that side of the ball? Is there a coaching aspect to it? I think was this the first or the second year that I think it's the second year. I think last year. So last year is so hard because it was such an odd year for so many reasons. But I believe Steve Belichick was calling the defensive plays last year too. So, I mean, is it play calling? Is it coaching? I don't know. You'd like to think it's not coaching when you have a Bill Belichick coach team, but who knows? So the defense is a big thing to kind of unpack going forward. I think one of the things that the Bills really exposed, maybe better than anybody else did, obviously, was that they're just not fast enough on defense. And that's never been a hallmark of the Patriots, is being a fast defense. But they've always made up for that with scheme. And for whatever reason, they couldn't do it this year. So it makes me think that there needs to be something done. And we'll actually talk about some of that in a little bit because I do have a list of the impending free agents for the team. So we'll kind of go through that list and see what we could be looking at for changes for next year. I guess, and I probably should have said this off the top, like just a caveat to this whole conversation or any of the conversations here, especially I'm just a football fan. I'm no expert. I'm just a guy who sits on his couch and watches the game on Sundays. So, and I follow pretty closely, so I come with that mentality. So again, take my opinion with a grain of salt. But anyway, another takeaway from Saturday's game was Mac Jones actually didn't play that bad, all things considered. Rookie playing in his first playoff game. He had a good season for the most part. Well, I'll probably hit on that a little bit, but just focusing on Saturday's game, I mean, you look at some of the mistakes that he made. The first interception, which you can argue was slightly underthrown, but that was just a really good play by Micah Hyde, who came out of nowhere and intercepted that. And maybe you can say that Nelson Aguilar should have gone up for it instead of waiting it to come down to him. But you had that play. You had the second interception, which was a tip ball. No, I mean, it was deflected. It was, I believe, it was a pass intended to Hunter Henry, and I don't know. I mean, it was definitely maybe a pass that Mac shouldn't have thrown, but again, it's one of those things where it went off the receiver's hands and ended up in the defenses. So again, maybe decision making there wasn't the greatest, but not the most egregious mistake in the world. And then the other real big one was they got called for a delay of game penalty. And I think it was towards the end of the first half when they were driving, and it was still. I mean, it wasn't. I want to say it was a game. I think they were down. They were down 27 at that point, but it was going in towards the end of the half, being able to score, plus the Patriots were going to get the ball in the second half. So in theory, if you get a couple of scores there, you cut that to a 2-score game at the beginning of the second half, and that's not a crazy deficit to try and come back from at that point. But they took a delay of game penalty, and it was a really bad one. Like, they were just at the line, and Jones just lost complete track of the play clock. So, but outside of those plays, it really wasn't a bad game for Jones. I think he was definitely one of the very few bright spots out of anybody. I think you could probably say Mac Jones had a pretty good game. Not a great game, but a pretty good game. And Kendrick Bourne had a pretty good game too. I mean, he had 2 touchdowns, did he? 2 touchdown catches maybe? But yeah, so I think Jones really didn't have a terrible game, all things considered. So I think that's really, in a situation like this, when you're looking at your team getting blown out of the water like that, that's something that you can kind of look at and go, okay, maybe we have something here with this guy. And I think that's one of the things to take away from the game, where while the game and the season more than the game really, but for the kind of looking at the season as a whole, there's reason to be optimistic, as badly as it all ended, and I think that's important. I think it's fair. I've seen people kind of going back and forth, especially on like Facebook and Twitter, a bit over the last few days since Saturday night, and it feels like there's 2 diametrically opposed opinions about this Patriots team right now, where you have some people who are saying, "Oh my God, they're awful. It needs an overhaul," and then there are other people saying they're fine, like they're fine, like don't worry about it. And I think neither of those are really correct. It's somewhere in the middle. But it's weird because I think you have to kind of look at the season in its totality to really have a kind of grasp on how to really feel about it. And it's easy to say, on one hand, entering the season with a rookie quarterback after not making the playoffs last year, you're going through a rebuild, and to make the playoffs is a good step in the right direction. And that's fair. Entering the season, that's a fair, I think, expectation. There are people who will look at that and say, yeah, but how much they spent on free agency to get where they got is not good enough. I think that's somewhat fair, but I think you have to look at how those free agents that they brought in performed, and there was definitely not the level of performance that you may be paid for. I think off the top of my head, it was very, I don't know if disappointing is the right word, but I think Nelson Aguilar didn't have a great season. He didn't feel, as someone who watched all of the games, he didn't feel like a factor often. And I know he was injured for a few weeks down the stretch, but he just never, he was paid somewhat, maybe not as like a true number one, but on this team, I feel like he was brought in as a number one receiver, and he never felt like that over the course of the season. Jacoby Myers was the one who led them in receiving, I believe. So I think it was a little disappointing what you got out of Aguilar. To be fair though, I didn't expect a ton from him. When I heard the signing, I was like, okay, that's a nice signing. I don't I'm not super excited about it, but I think he's a nice piece. But if you're bringing him in expecting him to be a number one receiver, I think you're probably going to be disappointed by that. So that he was one, and then obviously I think the other one was, and it was touched on a lot during some of the broadcasts of their games, was Jonnu Smith. I was actually really excited when I heard about them signing him away from Tennessee because he was a weapon for the Titans last year, and he never really was this year for whatever reason. He ended up seeming to be used more in the running game on like tight end arounds and stuff like that, which I mean it was okay. They got him. It was the idea of I think Josh McDaniels had of just getting him the ball and seeing what he could do with it, but he never felt like a big threat in the passing game, which is what you brought him in for. I mean, that was one of the things that was very exciting when they signed Smith and they also signed Hunter Henry, and having those two strong tight end options, I think was really a good move. But for whatever reason, Jonnu Smith just didn't end up having a really impactful season. So hopefully that turns around next year, and you get that that two-headed tight end offense that they've had in the past. Because if you look at the way that their offense ran this year, and I think some of it was probably due to having a rookie quarterback, but they were very much a run-first team. And I think having those two tight ends that are viable pass options, but also can be used in the run game for blocking, I think it's very critical if you're going to run your offense that way, because you're gonna focus on the run, but then that also gives you the option to play action. And when you have those tight ends that can be effective weapons in the passing game, having them both on the field and having that play action threat and the run threat is good. I liked their style of offense, at least from a sense of it's. And it's weird because we look at the NFL in 2022 and the last several years, you probably go back almost 10 years at this point. And in general, it's such a spread them out, throw the ball all over the field style that the game has transitioned into. So seeing a team that's more, I guess, smash mouth running, power running is rare. I mean, how many teams have an actual fullback that they use as much as the Patriots use Jakob Johnson? I mean, I don't see it that often. Usually you'll see it in short yardage situations, and half the time it won't even be a quote unquote fullback. It'll like an actual fullback. It'll be a tight end or an extra offensive lineman that they put in at fullback. So, I mean, I like that style of football, but it is different from what you normally see, and it is different from how this offense was with Tom Brady. And you hate to invoke the Tom Brady thing, but it's true. The offense was just completely different with Jones in this year, and I think some of it has to do with the fact that they entered training camp with Cam Newton on this team. And whether you believe Bill Belichick or not, he said from the get-go that Cam Newton was the starting quarterback. Now, obviously, we saw how that played out, and they released Newton in training camp and decided to go with Mac Jones. But at that point, I don't think you can just completely reinvent your offense. I mean, you can over the course of the season, don't get me wrong. But again, rookie quarterback, I think they want to protect him a little bit. So you got what you got. I know there were people who were complaining that they didn't unleash Mac more, I guess is how they would put it is, let him throw the ball around more. And there's probably something to that, but overall, I think you can't really argue too much with how Jones performed in the regular season. He definitely did fall off a little bit towards the end of the year, and people were talking about, oh, maybe he hit the rookie wall, the proverbial rookie wall. Maybe he did. You could maybe make that argument because he definitely was not as efficient as he was earlier in the year. But again, I don't think you can put that solely on him. I think the team as a whole fell off hard towards the end of the season. I mean, they lost, 3 of the last 4? Against 2 of those being against teams that didn't make the playoffs. That's not something that you normally see out of a Patriots team. So, but again, I think you look at it, and Flair actually asked a good question here, asking about the rookie wall. Rookies have a habit of underperforming at some point. So what happens is that typically what people think is that because the NFL season is longer and just more intense than the college football season, that rookies in their first season just have that point where it's just wear and tear and just a lot mentally that they go through in the transition from college to the pros. So not always. I mean, you can look at rookies who have unbelievable rookie seasons. So it's not a uniform thing. But there can be a tendency for some rookies to come in and then as you get towards the end of the season to struggle a little bit. Not even not terrible. Like I said, I don't think Mac Jones had a really awful season at all, but he did, if you look at his numbers at the beginning of the season to where they were at the end of the season, there was a little bit of a drop off. Not I don't think anything alarming, and I don't think anything that would make you be super concerned as a Patriots fan going into next season, but it's something to look at. But going back to the whole thing about looking at the team, the expectations. So you had this expectation of team rebuilding, rookie quarterback, missed the playoffs last year, and they struggled out of the gate. They were 2-4, I believe 2-4 after week 6. And then they ripped off that 7-game winning streak. And it surged them up to the number 1 seed in the AFC at that time. So now you're looking at it, what was it? What are we saying? 7. So you're 9-4. You've got, 13 games? You've got 4 games left to go. So basically 5 weeks, because I think that was going into the bye week. And you are in control of the number 1 seed in the AFC. All you need to do is basically take care of business the rest of the way, and you have home field throughout the playoffs. Plus a first round bye, which we'll talk about in a little bit when we actually talk about the playoffs as a whole, is now more important than ever. That number 1 seed has always been very important for the fact that every game in your conference's playoffs go through your stadium. But now, where the 2 seed has to actually play on wild card weekend, that number 1 seed is the only team that gets a bye. And that's so important at this time of year. You have an extra week to rest your players, and you have an extra week to kind of prepare. Not that you know who you're preparing for in that week off, but you have an idea. It's very limited. As the number 1 seed, it's pretty limited to who your options are that you're going to be playing against. Flair says, "Can I bring up something not entirely football but related to it?" Sure. Go ahead. But so the Patriots are going into their bye week with the number one seed in the AFC, they have games left against Buffalo, Indianapolis, Jacksonville, and Miami. Now, Jacksonville, as it was a cakewalk and an expected win. Those other three, you could argue, either could have been wins, or at the very least, you split, you win two of them, and you still are in a good spot. But they dropped all three of those games. So I can understand the perspective that you're looking at the Patriots sitting at 9-4, owning the number one seed, and all you have to do is close out the season strong, and you likely lock up that number one seed. To drop all the way from there to not even winning the division into a wild card spot, having to go on the road for that wild card game. And it's just, I can understand the sentiment of people who look at that and can be disappointed. It's fair. It's fair. I think it's fair for someone's expectations to shift over the course of the season. You enter the season, you look at the team, you look at their schedule, you look at the other teams in their division, the other teams in their conference, and you kind of get a gauge of how you feel they're going to do. And then as the season plays on, your expectations may shift as you get more information. I think that's fair. When it comes down to it, I'm not willing to call the Patriots season a failure. I can say it's disappointing a little bit because they had a chance to, again, like I said, finish strong, enter the playoffs strong, and maybe do some damage in the playoffs. If they're hosting, obviously if you have a bye, you're not going to lose in the wild card round if you have a bye. If you're hosting, maybe that makes a difference. Maybe it doesn't this year. This Patriots team was not good at home. For whatever reason, their record at home was awful. They did better on the road than they did at home, which is bizarre in generally speaking. So yeah, it's, again, I can understand people being a little bit disappointed, but I think overall, I look at it and I say, they came into the season with a rookie quarterback. You weren't 100% sure what you were going to get from him. You thought that he might be the guy. I think he proved he can be the guy. The team improved. Maybe not as much as some people would have liked. They didn't get as far as people would have liked, obviously. No one wants to see their team get bounced in the first round. But I think there are things that can be built on going forward. I think that's one of the important things to look at, is that this was not about necessarily this year. I think part of why people got so frustrated is that they saw the team doing so well and it became a national story. This wasn't just Yahoo local Boston fans saying that the Patriots were going to go to the Super Bowl and everybody was salivating over a Patriots Buccaneers Super Bowl. Belichick against Brady and all this stuff. This was not just people in Boston saying this. These were national analysts, national pundits talking about this as a possibility. I think at one point, Vegas had that as the odds-on favorite for the Super Bowl matchup. So I can understand people looking at that and then looking how the season played out and being a little disappointed. It's fair. But again, I just look at it and go, I'm kind of okay with it. Not okay with the fact that it felt like they didn't show up on Saturday, because it felt like the team did not show up. The defense certainly didn't. There's questions. There are still questions with this team. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done before they get into next season. The defense needs to be addressed. You cannot have what happened with this defense in the playoffs against the Bills specifically, because whether you like it or not, and I know Bills fans are doing a victory lap right now, thinking that they now own the AFC East until Josh Allen retires. But they're your main competition right now in the division. They've won the division the last 2 years. They're the team that you have to unseat. You need to find a way to get that offense off the field. So that needs to be addressed. But Mac Jones looks like he could be the guy for you for the next however many years. There are people who think he doesn't have the arm strength. Right now, you could maybe say he doesn't. But I think that's something that can be developed. You look at Tom Brady, and I hate even doing this comparison, because the moment that you compare Mac Jones to Tom Brady, everyone kind of rolls their eyes. So this is not about saying that Mac Jones is Tom Brady or will ever be Tom Brady. It's not fair to Mac Jones, and right now it's a stupid thing to say. But Tom Brady, when he entered the league, was not a physical specimen. I mean, there's those famous pictures of him at the combine. And there are similarities between him and Mac Jones, as far as physical similarities from college and entering the pros and into their first year in the pros. Brady did not have amazing arm strength that first year that the Patriots went to the Super Bowl. And he developed his physical presence over time. I think Mac Jones can do that. I would be shocked if that doesn't happen. I think the more important thing right now is that from a mental standpoint, I think this is the guy that you can get behind. A lot of people were saying, everyone wants to do who does this guy compare to? What pro quarterback does this guy remind you of? And a lot of people always, early on, said Mac Jones was Chad Pennington. Some people thought that was okay. Some people thought that was damning Mac Jones. But Chad Pennington was a fine NFL quarterback. Maybe not elite. So I don't know if that's a fair comp for Mac Jones or not. But I think you can develop those physical skills. You can develop that arm strength. You can work on that. Strength and conditioning is one of the biggest things that changes for players coming from college into the NFL. So there's room for growth there. I think his demeanor, his understanding of the game, the way that he reads defenses, those are things that you can teach, but they seem to come more naturally to him. And I don't know if it's naturally or it's just the fact of how he's grown up as a quarterback. I don't want to pontificate about high school because I don't know anything about that stuff. But playing for Nick Saban at Alabama, you're in essence being groomed to be a professional. So I think there is a lot there to be able to look at and go, this is going to be something that could be potentially good to great. Some people were going crazy and be like, oh, they got the next Brady. Let's not go that far. But he doesn't have to be Tom Brady. He doesn't have to be Tom Brady. It's as simple as that. I know some people are going to say, oh, they got lucky he fell to them. Somewhat. They did. They got lucky that Tom Brady fell to them in the 6th round when they drafted him too. So that factors in. But I'm fine. I'm fine with Mac Jones. I'm not going to panic. I think he overall had a good season. I think he's going to get better. And I think the team's going to be better. I did see your comment, Flair, and I am going to get to it because it will factor in to the playoff discussion that I'm going to get to. So overall, I think the Patriots are in decent shape. Again, work to be done, and that work is going to start in the offseason. Now, I have a list of their free agents. I'm just going to run through it quick, maybe give a couple of thoughts. I don't want to take too long on it. But these are a list of their players who are unrestricted free agents, meaning they can basically sign anywhere they want. So one of the big ones is Devin McCourty. I think he'll be back unless he decides to retire. I would hate to see him go somewhere else. I feel like he is the kind of person that would consider taking less money if needed to stay here. Although, maybe not. I don't know. I would hate to see him end his career with another team. He's always been one of my favorite Patriots since he got here. And I think he brings a veteran leadership to that defense. And I think it's going to be very important in the next couple of years to have that kind of a presence in the locker room. Not even talking about on the field. So I'm hoping he's back. Dante Hightower, I think he'll be back. I don't know. No, I don't know anything. I mean, I'm not an insider. I will say he felt like a non-factor this season. Now, caveat again, I don't sit down and watch the all 22 film. I just watch the games, and it just doesn't feel like he made much of an impact on defense this year as he did with past years. He did sit out all of the 2020 season. He opted out for COVID. So after a year off and coming back in, maybe that's not crazy that happened. Maybe another full season, a full off season, a full training camp, and we roll back into 2022 season, and he's ready to be what he was before, which I think is very important. He's another guy who's, they talk about it in baseball, and it's true in football too. You want to be strong defensively up the middle. So, your defensive tackles, your middle linebackers, and your safeties. Important to be strong in those positions. And having Dante Hightower back as he was before COVID, I think is a great addition to this team. That was one of the things that people talked about coming in this year, about how the defense was going to be better, because aside from the free agent acquisitions, they're getting Hightower back. It just didn't seem to work out as well for him this year. So hopefully he's back. Trent Brown, kind of a question mark here. I think he's a great fit for this offensive line. I think their offensive line played very well, by and large. They struggled a little bit early in the season when the team was struggling, but they really kind of turned it on as the season wore on. They were one of the strong points of this team, I think. I feel like after the first few games, Mac Jones didn't feel like he was nearly under as much pressure from opposing defenses, and I think Trent Brown's a big part of that. Will he be back? Not sure, but again, another guy I don't think they can really afford to let him go, but we've said that before about guys for the Patriots, and they somehow figure it out anyway. J.C. Jackson is going to be a big one. He is going to command big money, which is never something that the Patriots are willing to spend. I shouldn't say never. Rarely are they willing to spend. This guy feels like he could be the next Malcolm Butler, where an undrafted guy, he comes in, he makes an impact, and then when it comes time to pay him, Belichick doesn't want to pay him, and he goes elsewhere. I feel like that's very likely to happen there are going to be teams that are going to throw stupid amount of money at him, and he deserves it. He's had a great couple of seasons, these last few seasons especially. Maybe the Patriots give him the franchise tag, and he's kept on a 1-year deal at the franchise tag money. I wouldn't be shocked. I would not want to see him go at this point. That secondary struggled at times this year. They had the thing with Stephon Gilmore. They traded him when it seemed like he wasn't going to sign. Jonathan Jones missed a lot of time with injury. J.C. Jackson was basically the anchor. Oh God, I can't think of what's the guy they got from Philadelphia. He was, oh my God, now I'm going to look up the Patriots roster real quick. But I mean, J.C. Jackson was the glue for that secondary for the most part. He had a couple of games towards the end of the year that weren't the best, but honestly, overall, I mean, I don't think you can. I don't think you can say he was one of the issues this year. Jalen Mills. Jalen Mills was the guy I was thinking of. Couldn't remember his name off. You know why? Because he didn't have a good year at all. It seemed like every time he was involved in a play, it was bad. So they had problems at corner. J.C. Jackson was their only solid corner this year, and if they don't bring him back and they don't have a suitable replacement, I don't have a lot of high hopes for this defense for next year. They're going to get torched. So hopefully they can figure that out and find a way to bring him back. Matthew Slater is an interesting one. I mean, you don't usually spend a lot of time talking about special teams players, unless outside of kickers and maybe kick returners, but Slater's another one of those guys I'd hate to see him leave. And I don't think he will leave. I think it's either they're going to bring him back or he's going to retire. One of the two. But there were games down the stretch, especially, where his kickoff and punt coverage is just unbelievable. And I think it's, I think there's a value to what he brings to a team in special teams. Field position is so important. It gets overlooked oftentimes, but it's a very important part of the game. And Matthew Slater is really important for that. Not to mention he's one of the leaders on this team in the locker room too. So I would hate to see them not bring him back. And again, I would hate to see him finish with another team, but I don't think he will. He doesn't. From what I've heard, he has no interest in playing for another team. So, but I definitely want. I think he still can play. I think he still had a great season this year, as far as special teamers go. So, let's bring him back. Ted Karras is another guy. He was kind of the sixth offensive lineman, but he got a significant amount of playing time due to injuries, and he's basically their backup center when Andrews is injured. So not a major piece, but a good piece to have. Be interesting to see if they can keep that offensive line fairly intact, or I mean, if they upgrade it, great. But I think that offensive line was one of the strengths of the team. So if we don't screw with that, I'm fine with it. James White is going to be an interesting one. I think super unfortunate for him that he had that injury this year and basically missed the entire season. You always hate to see that when a guy, especially for a guy going into his free agent year. I think because you never know how a guy has an injury like that is going to come back. So other teams might be hesitant to bring a guy like that in, or if they are, it's going to be at a reduced value of what he probably would have got in the open market. So I think he's likely back, and I think he would be a nice addition back to the team. I think they missed some of what he provides. They relied a lot on Brandon Bolden to fill that pass receiving running back role. And he did okay. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't great either. So having James White back is a big addition. So hopefully, again, he's another guy they hopefully bring back. Brandon King, I just want to mention quickly, just because another special teams guy. He's kind of the guy who will probably take over that leadership role in the special teams unit if Slater leaves. He's another guy who I think for a special teamer, somewhat important piece. Not like, oh my God, break the bank for this guy, but a nice piece to have on your team. And again, I guess I've been watching Belichick too long. I love special teams guys. Brandon Bolden, we just mentioned, he's a free agent as well. I think he had a pretty good season. They used him a lot more than they did in the past, more out of necessity than anything else. I know there were people who weren't a fan of how much he was used, but I think as a third running back, and if you bring James White back in, he ends up being more of a fourth running back. That's a pretty good fourth running back to have on your team. Plus, he adds value on special teams. I think he'll be back. I think Belichick loves this guy. He's just versatile. So he's a Belichick guy. So I would be shocked if Bolden's not back. Brian Hoyer, I could take or leave. I think there is merit to having a backup quarterback who's a veteran. Right now, they have obviously Mac Jones, Hoyer if he returns, and oh God, what the heck was the kid's name who was Jarrett Stidham, who everyone was kind of thought last year should have got more time and they wanted Newton benched. But I think having Hoyer as your backup maybe serves you better than Jarrett Stidham. I think Jarrett Stidham is maybe a better quarterback than Brian Hoyer, but having that veteran presence who can just come in a pinch if something happens to your starter mid-game, I think there's value there. Supposedly he did a lot for Mac Jones in helping him learn and prepare. So great. Have him there to help keep with that development. Totally fine. Nick Folk is interesting. He was one of the better kickers this year. He was super reliable. And the interesting thing was they I don't think they drafted him. Quinn Nordine they drafted, I think. And it looked like he was going to be the kicker, and then all of a sudden they ended up going to Folk at the end of the preseason, at the end of training camp, and cut Nordine and ended up signing him back to the practice squad. So I think it's going to come down to if they think they have something with Nordine, they let Folk go, but I kind of would hate to see it the way he's kicked. I mean, we've seen around the league, kicking has been crazy. And having a guy that you can rely on is more important than it's ever been. So I'd hate to see him go. Juwan Bentley's interesting. Middle linebacker, very good in the run game, okay in the passing game. I don't know if I want to see him covering too many running backs out of the backfield, but I think he's a solid piece. And I think depending on what happens with Dante Hightower, the necessity to keep Bentley is maybe reliant on that. I mean, ideally, I think you bring them both back, but I think if Hightower leaves, I think you need Bentley, at least for this season, unless you have some amazing replacement for Hightower. So, I don't think Bentley's a superstar piece, but I think he's a solid part of the defense and can be. Jamie Collins is the last unrestricted free agent. I don't know what to make of Jamie Collins. He's one of those guys, and this is his third time being brought back to New England. I'm still kind of confused as to why he keeps ending up back here. Not because he's a bad player. I just don't think he's a Belichick player. And Belichick keeps bringing him back. So it shows what I know. But He feels like one of those guys that is immensely talented, but doesn't always necessarily fit within the structure and scheme of a defense. Not to say he doesn't fit in a defense, but he's one of those guys that you will just go out and just make plays. But the Patriots defense is not a never been a defense that has really been based on guys that can go out and make plays. So I would not be shocked if he's not back. He also didn't really seem to do a ton this year. And again, he was brought back in the middle of the season. So that might have had something to do with it. But again, if he's back, great. If he's not, I don't think I lose sleep over it. There's a couple of restricted free agents that they have. Jacoby Myers, I think he'll be back. I think they'll do whatever they can. He was a very intricate part of not intricate, that's not the word I want. A very important part of the offense this year. He led the team in receiving. He became one of Mac Jones' kind of go-to guys. And since he's been here, he's been one of the more reliable targets for whoever's been a quarterback. I know he didn't click immediately with Brady in 2019. Newton relied on him quite a bit last year, and Mac Jones, obviously, he became one of his favorite targets. So, nothing but great things to say about him. I don't think he's a number one, but I think he is a solid 2 or 3. And the Patriots offense, historically, has been built on having guys like that. So, definitely hope he's back for sure. I'd be shocked if he wasn't. Gunnar Olszewski is interesting. I think he's one of those guys, and primarily serves as their kick and punt returner. And I think he's a good return man, but he makes some really odd decisions sometimes. There are times where he brings balls out of the end zone on kickoffs that I look at him and go, "What are you doing?" And they end up inside the 20. So I think he makes some suspect decisions, but I don't think they have a better option there right now. So I'm fine with Gunnar. And then the other one, Jakob Johnson. I love Jakob Johnson. I love fullbacks. There aren't any of them left. I think Belichick loves him, so I think he'll be back, and I think he's not the most important part of the offense. Obviously, he's a fullback, but I think he played a good role this year in how they ran the offense. And if they're going to continue to be a run first team, I think he's someone you have to bring back. So that's their free agent list. Who knows what of those guys are going to be back and what aren't? So we could be looking at a completely different thing. Nobody thought they were going to spend as much in free agency as they did last year. I don't think they will do that again, but you never know. With the way that the season ended, Belichick might say, "You know what? We're going all in again." So we'll have to see. Overall, again, I'm encouraged with where they're at. Disappointing the way that the season ended, but I think we have to focus on the fact that, contrary to what some people want to think, they are still in a rebuilding phase. They're not in a rebuilding phase in the sense of some teams who are rebuilding for 6, 7, 8, 10. God knows how many seasons some of these teams are just bottom of the barrel. This team is not in that position, but the expectations have always been different for this team. Or I shouldn't say always, since 2001 have been different for this team. So I think they're in a good position if they can continue to build on the good things from this season and improve some of the things, obviously, that they struggled with. I think you're looking at a team that can definitely threaten the Bills in the division next year. And from there, who knows? Do I think they can be a Super Bowl contender next year? No, I wouldn't expect it. But depending on what they do between the draft and the other moves in the offseason, it wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world either. So There it is. So that was actually a lot longer on the Patriots than I thought I was going to go. So we're going to quickly get into some of the other games from the weekend and kind of look at the playoffs as a whole. Actually, you know what? Let's just talk. Let's talk about the playoffs first. So, two things that kind of stick out for me that I'm not a huge fan of. One is Monday night playoff games. I don't remember if they did this last year. So last year was the first year that they expanded the playoffs to 7 teams per conference. And so it was always 2 games in each conference on wild card weekend. So you did 2 games on Saturday, 2 games on Sunday. And then that expanded to 3 because you have 6 for that first playoff round. I hate the fact that they put a playoff game on Monday. I would love to just have 3 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday. Let's go. Football all weekend. I hate Monday night games. I hate them in the regular season. I hate Thursday night games. I'm not even a huge fan of Sunday night games, but that's never going to go away. And it's Sunday, so I can live with when the Patriots are playing on either Sunday, Monday, or Thursday night. I dread it because I have to get up at 4:00 in the morning for work the next day. So I don't want to be up until 11:30 or so on a work night watching football. But I do it anyways. So I hate the fact that there's a Monday night playoff game. I wish they would get rid of that and go back to like I said, I don't remember what they did last year. I probably should have looked it up before I did this, but 3 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday. There's no college games anymore when they get to this point in the season. There's no reason not to do something like basically do the same thing you do on Sunday. 1, 4, or like 1, 4:25 or whatever, and 8:30 or whatever you want to do. But back to back to back. There you go. There's Saturday and Sunday. It'd be great, but I don't want to spend too much more time ranting about that. The 7th playoff team in each conference is a terrible idea. I hate it. After seeing this in action for 2 years so far, it sucks. I hate the fact that they did this. It does. The one thing I guess you can say for it, obviously, it brings another team into the playoffs, which some people think is a good thing. I don't. But it does put a premium on that number 1 seed because you get the bye. It used to be 1 and 2. Now it's just 1. And having that week off, I mean, we saw a couple of the teams who were the 2 seeds suffer some injuries in those games that obviously they're not going to suffer if they're not playing that week. So the other thing on top of that is that, and I saw a stat, and I don't know if it was during the game last night between the Chiefs and the Steelers, or if it was after that I saw it. And granted, it's only 2 years of a sample size right now, so we're talking about 4 games, which is not a lot to go off of. But the average margin of victory in the games involving 7 seeds is 13 points, I think I saw. So these games are not close. So really, what do you get? I mean, granted, a lot of the games this weekend weren't close. But those 7 seed games especially, those games aren't close. You can argue that those are teams that don't belong in the playoffs. I mean, back when we had 6 teams in the playoffs, and I know it was an aberration year, but we had that year that the Seahawks won the NFC West with a losing record. And people were looking at that and like, how can that team be in the playoffs? Well, now you add a seventh seed. That's more likely to happen. So, I don't know. Not a fan of it. I wish they would get rid of it. But that brings up the comment that Flair made earlier. So he said, something that clicked with me when you said they get the home field the entire time in the playoffs for that position. I bet that's actually pretty good economically for the city if their team gets that. Oh, the owners love that. The owners love that. I mean, you're looking at it as, so if you're the number 1 seed right now and you have home field advantage throughout the playoffs, you are guaranteed 2 extra home games Oh, I shouldn't say two. If you win, if you keep winning. Obviously, if you lose that first playoff game, you only get one. But that's at least one, if not two extra home games that you get ticket revenue, concessions, yada yada yada, everything that goes along with having people in your stadium for a game. So I'm sure it's great for the owners, and by association, yes, for the city that's hosting, there's you know you more even more so for the playoffs is you do get people traveling from visiting cities to go to these games. So there is a boom for some of the cities just in the fact that they have people coming to the city for these games. So you're talking about hotels, restaurants in the area, all that stuff too. So there is definitely something to that. Um, but yeah, it's just and it's from a competitive standpoint, generally speaking, and like I said, this didn't hold true for the Patriots this year. Teams typically play better at home. If you don't know, you know, betting lines, it's generally considered that home field is worth 3 points in a betting line. So if you're not a gambling person and you don't quite understand what I'm talking about, if they think two teams are evenly matched, and it would normally be a pick'em, which means they don't think either team is favored, the home team would be favored by 3 points. Like home field advantage is basically worth, in theory, to Vegas and sports books. Generally speaking, in football, home field advantage is worth 3 points. So there is a tangible thing there with being home. So again, another reason why now, I guess you can say with the 7 seeds, one is even that much more important, but I think it's more so for the bye than anything. All right, so let's quickly just go around and look at the other games. Not a whole lot to talk about on some of them, but there are a couple of very big things to talk about on a couple of the games. We'll start with the first game on Saturday, which was the Bengals defeating the Raiders. Interesting, the Raiders, looked like they were out of that game for a little while. They came back and made a game of it, and gave themselves a chance at the end. But the big play that obviously everyone is talking about is the Burrow touchdown pass. I think it was towards the end of the second quarter. And I had that game on, but I didn't have the sound on, which is going to be actually important for this, because I didn't realize that there was a big deal about what had happened in that game, because it was kind of on in the background. I was doing other stuff, and I was watching the game as I was on my computer doing other stuff. And Ash came out to me actually and was like, "Oh, people are like really pissed about the Bengals," and I'm like, "Well, like what happened?" So she's like, "Oh, just look on Facebook. Everyone's talking about it." So I went on Facebook, and so I've come to find out, the play happens. Burrow is, rolling out towards the sideline, is about to go out of bounds, throws the ball, and completes it for a touchdown. I saw the play as it happened, and I saw them looking at the replay, and I'm like, he's clearly in bounds. He got let go of the ball before out of bounds. No, nothing to complain about. Problem is, apparently one of the referees blew the whistle before the play was completed. So this is one of those situations, and I'll go on record, is I am not the biggest fan of instant replay. I think the way that instant replay is used in almost all sports is bordering on the ridiculous at this point. I am totally fine with replay being used to make sure that if there is a very obvious blown call, that it's corrected. That's what instant replay should be for. I hate the fact that we go and we look at some of these plays, and they go to, frame by frame, looking at fractions of an inch. It's not, what are we doing? If it's not obvious that the call was missed on the field, just stay with the call on the field. Why do we have referees if we're going to micro analyze every play. It's not every play. There's limited challenges in most sports. Actually, I think all sports. But I don't even like the fact that a lot of these things rely on coaches' challenges. Have a replay official if you're going to do it, and if it's obvious that they got the call wrong, have the replay official buzz down to the field, tell them they got it wrong, get it right, and move on. I don't need to see a referee or whoever watching a replay for more than a minute, 2 minutes, whatever, looking at it from 15 different angles, slowing it down to the slightest frame by frame movement to try and figure out if the ball is a fraction of an inch, over the end zone, end line, or whatever. I don't like it. I don't like it. But in the case of what happened there, and it's tough. It's tough because it involves a referee's whistle. Can you tell that on replay? Can you tell that it was a referee's whistle and not some random whistle in the crowd? Can you? I don't know. I would like to think that you could review that and go, hey, he blew the whistle, this shouldn't count. But I don't know that you can say that. I don't know, can you prove? I almost think the only way you can fix something like this, and I'm not against this. It's 2022. Why does the referee have to put this whistle in his mouth and blow it and make a sound? He could have something in his hand, and I will say this, and I know the first thing someone's going to say is you need the whistle so the players know to stop playing. Yes. Have a device in his hand. He pushes a button and it makes the sound, but it also electronically signals that the play is over. This way, if there's any question, they go to the replay and they know, hey, this is when his button was buzzed. This is when the play was whistled dead. Maybe you can say, what if he accidentally presses the button? I guess it's harder to accidentally blow a whistle. I don't know. But I think that's the only way that you can actually reliably look at what happened in that Bengals game and make that call right. Fix that call, I guess, is how you put it. Do I think that was the reason why the Bengals won? No. Yeah, it makes a difference if the touchdown isn't on the board. I don't remember the exact situation. Was it third down? Would they have kicked a field goal there? I don't remember the exact situation, so I don't want to say. But it was also in the second quarter. There was 2 whole quarters after that. If the Bengals don't score a touchdown on that play, the game changes. And you can't. I hate the argument when people will say, well, if that play didn't happen, they wouldn't have got those 7 points and XYZ would have happened. You can't just look at one play being taken off the board and look at the final score and say that is how the game would have played out from there. If that touchdown doesn't happen there, the rest of the game is played completely differently. So you can't, the only time that you could make that claim is if it's the last play of the game. Because nothing after that matters. If there's a blown call on the last play of the game and it affects what the final score would have been, you have a case. Something that happens in the second quarter, yeah, it sucks. It sucks they got that call wrong. But you can't just say you take that touchdown off the board and the game, the Raiders would have won or whatever. You can't do it. My opinion. Some people might say I'm wrong. My opinion. But anyways, so that's the I will say this Bengals team is pretty good. Their offense is really good. They're a little bit scary. And I know there are people who are going, Yeah, but they're the Bengals. They'll eventually screw it up, and I don't think you can necessarily do that because this is not the Marvin Lewis Bengals. So I think they're an interesting team to watch the rest of the way. Let's see. First game on Sunday was obviously second game on Saturday. We talked a lot about Bills and Patriots. Don't need to go into any of that anymore. Um, Buccaneers defeating the Eagles. Not much to really talk about here. Again, 7 seed. Eagles probably didn't belong in the playoffs. Happy for their fans, I guess. Actually, I'm not. I'm not. I shouldn't. I don't want to blanket. I don't want to blanket fan bases because Boston fans get blanketed and they probably deserve it most of the time. But by and large, a lot of the Eagles fans are dinks. So I know a few Eagles fans who are actually really great people, though. So again, we're not going to blanket. So I'm not sad for the rank and file Eagles fans that they got bounced. Tampa Bay is interesting right now. We're defending champions. They're playing well. I think it's a testament to that team that everything that happened with Antonio Brown a few weeks ago didn't affect the team more than it would have if it was maybe a team that I don't want to say isn't as good, but isn't as I don't know, maybe good's the right word. I don't know. Apparently they're equipped to handle it. What happened with him for many teams would have been a major distraction. And they just, kept on going. So good on the Bucs. I wouldn't mind maybe seeing them win another one. I'm always going to respect the hell out of Tom Brady. If he gets another one, it won't bother me any. I know that there are some people who never want to see him win another one. After some people around here, a lot of people nationally who never want to see him win another one. That's for damn sure. But a lot of people there are quite a few people around here that would never want to see him win another game, let alone another Super Bowl. I am not in that group. So I'm not a fan of Bruce Arians. I think he is, I don't know, he's a good coach, but we basically saw him come on the field and hit one of his players this week because the guy was gonna almost get a stupid penalty, and so you can't do that. I don't know how that isn't a bigger deal, but so if it wasn't for Tom Brady, I would have no interest in seeing the Bucs do well. So again, not a fan of Bruce Arians, but whatever. I think they've got as good a shot at it as anybody in the NFC of making it to the Super Bowl. San Francisco and Dallas. For a while, that was not a game. Dallas roared back into that and made it a game. And then the end of that game happened. And oh my God, the way that game ended was completely unbelievable. So I didn't realize it until very close to the end that I thought that San Francisco was up by 7. They were only up by 6. Dallas gets the ball back with just under 2 minutes to go. And they failed to advance it and turned it over on downs. The 49ers couldn't quite run out the clock because Dallas still had 2 timeouts left. Wait, did Dallas turn it over on downs or did they turn it over? I don't remember. Either way, San Francisco got the ball back. I think they had to have turned it over because it was really quickly. But neither here nor there. Dallas gets the ball back with what? Was it 30 seconds left, if that? And they were on their own 20, needing a touchdown. They start moving the ball down the field, through the air, sideline passes. They even ran a hook and ladder on their first play. I don't know what the 49ers were doing. In that situation, all you do You defend the deep pass and you defend the sidelines. Make them throw the ball towards the middle of the field and tackle them in bounds. And for whatever reason, they were letting 10 to 15-yard out routes end up open so they could just catch the ball and go out of bounds. Dallas gets the ball down fairly into San Francisco territory. And I'm sitting here going, San Francisco is just giving them a chance to win. Like, this is inexplicable. 14 seconds left. And I don't know if this was the play call or if Dak Prescott improvised. I feel like this was the play call. Based on how it went, I feel like this was the play call. Dallas runs a quarterback draw right up the middle. Prescott gets 10 or so yards and slides down. Now they're running to the line, and they have to spike the ball to give themselves one final chance to throw the ball towards the end zone. But they don't get the snap off in time. Two things happened. Maybe three. Let's unpack the whole thing. One, why are you running a quarterback draw in that situation? Why? You're going to get, again, you got 10 yards closer to get a little bit of a better shot. Why not try and throw a quick out route? You know, they ran a screen. Run that screen again. Why not? Even if you don't, you get 5 to 10 yards and you're right in the end, you're on the sideline. It's an easy out of bounds. You run a quarterback draw. Prescott waited way too long to slide. I get it. He was probably trying to get as many yards as he could. Then, Dallas, as they're running to the line to line up, snap the ball and spike it, Prescott hands the ball to his center. The offensive line all get together like they're lined up. The umpire, who is there to spot the ball, has to basically run through the offensive line. The only other option he had was to run around them. And if he did that, people would have lost their minds. So he tries to get through the offensive line to grab the ball, spot it so they can snap it. They don't get the playoff. He basically gets stuck a little bit behind the line. He gets his way through, puts the ball down. Dallas doesn't get the playoff. You have to hand the ball to a referee in that situation. If you're Dak Prescott, you hand the ball to the referee and then get into position and let him spot it. Not to say that if he did, they would have got it done. But considering that they snapped the ball just after the clock hit 0, they probably would have. And at least at that point, you get one shot at the end zone, and who knows what happens? Because I feel like they were at like the 30, maybe even the 25. That's not a crazy, that's not a Hail Mary. 25 yards to the end zone, that's doable. You don't have to sit there. Your line doesn't have to block for that long to allow your receivers time to get to the end zone. You even have the option of maybe having someone run short of the end zone and do another hook and ladder or something similar. If you don't have anything in the end zone, you have options. But they didn't even give themselves a chance because they called a stupid play and they didn't know what to do to give themselves a chance. San Francisco did everything they could on that last drive to give Dallas a chance to win the game. And Dallas basically said, thanks, we appreciate that, but we're good. It's unbelievable. People were immediately calling for Mike McCarthy to be fired. I heard somebody, and I forget who it was, someone that I follow on Twitter, said that Mike McCarthy should be fired on the sideline on the spot. I don't ever want to call for anyone's job like that. I don't ever want to. I mean, but that guy, man, that guy. I don't know. I don't know how he can come back as the coach of that team next year. It's you can't butcher something like that badly. And he's not a great coach. He's not a great coach. So I don't know. Unbelievable way that game ended. I did see some people saying that like Dallas fans and Jerry Jones are gonna be pissed at the referees for that. If you're blaming the referees as a Cowboys fan after the way that game ended, you don't have any idea what you're talking about. It's the easy scapegoat to go, the ref screwed us. No. Your offensive coordinator, your quarterback, and your offensive line screwed you. That's what it comes down to. So there's no debate. There's no debate that the referees did anything wrong there. Maybe you can argue that the umpire didn't get there quick enough. These are referees. These aren't, wide receivers who run, 4.2 40s. It is what it is. So, amazing end of that game. Amazing. If you haven't seen it, watch the highlights. Watch the highlights of that game. Just that last drive alone is mind-boggling. There was two teams actively taking turns trying to lose a game. A playoff game. It's unbelievable. So that brings us to the last game, or the last game that we've seen so far. And that's the Chiefs and the Steelers. Again, not much to get here either. Chiefs routed them. I think it was 21-point win, something like that. Again, the case for a 7 seed not needing to be in the playoffs. This Steelers team really didn't belong in the playoffs. It was really weird. Not weird. It's expected. That people were gonna make a big deal about this being potentially Ben Roethlisberger's last game. I hate to see people make such a big deal about him. I think he's a scumbag. I mean, he's a good quarterback. He's won what? He won 2 Super Bowls. He's probably going to end up in the Hall of Fame, but I don't think anybody should be making a big deal about that guy. Sorry. He doesn't deserve it. For his off the field stuff. So, one man's opinion, probably not one man's opinion. I've heard other people echo similar sentiments. So, I don't want to focus any more time on him. The only thing I'll say, Kansas City's offense is amazing to watch. And one of the things that is super interesting is Patrick Mahomes. I'm not the biggest fan of Patrick Mahomes. I find him a little bit obnoxious. Maybe that's unreasonable. Maybe it's because he's on all these commercials. I don't know. People hated Tom Brady for years. They still do. It's fine. I get it. But watching him play is unbelievable. It is like watching someone play video game football, watching the things that he does. I didn't watch all of that game live. It started too late. I needed to get to bed. I watched the highlights this morning, and seeing him run around and throw the ball the way that he does, it doesn't look like it should ever work, and it does more often than not. It's amazing. I mean, you got to give the guy credit. He's an amazing athlete. His arm, he has a cannon for an arm. He'll throw on the run and make throws look easy that just are not easy. He'll throw across his body, which is not necessarily always the smartest thing to do. But again, it's literally watching someone play Madden. And they're just running around with their quarterback and just throwing the ball, and it doesn't matter if you set your feet, and it ends up being a good throw. I feel like doing that in Madden punishes you more than what Mahomes gets away with in real life. It's unbelievable. So say what you want. I'm not a fan of the Chiefs. I like. I'm not a fan of Travis Kelce. I think he's a tool, and but you cannot you cannot say enough about the way Patrick Mahomes plays. It's it's unbelievable to watch. So they're a threat. They're a threat to go all the way, and I would not be surprised at all if we see Kansas City and either Tampa Bay or Green Bay in the Super Bowl. I would. I think that's one of the more likely scenarios. Flair asked if I have any predictions for the game that mentioned that hasn't been played yet. Yep, I do. I don't have a lot to base it off of because it's two teams that I'm not as familiar with. That game, as I'm talking now, I think it just kicked off. So it's the Cardinals and the Rams. This game to me is very interesting because I think it's two teams that I don't want to say they're not as good as their records indicate, but they're definitely teams that I think you don't know what you're going to get when they step on the field on any given day. The Cardinals dropped 4 of their last 5 games, which is not how you want to enter the playoffs. I still think they're a very good team, but again, with the way that their season has kind of unfolded, I don't have high hopes for them. The Rams are a team that I think is, for what they've done personnel-wise, I think they should have had a better record than they did. I think they're a team that at times has all the makings of a team that can defeat anybody on any given day and could make a deep run. But I don't think they're going to. I think they win tonight. And then they go next week into Tampa Bay, and their season ends there. Which I think, for a lot of people, I don't want to speak for Rams fans because I don't know how many of them there actually are, because Los Angeles is a garbage sports town. Outside of maybe the Lakers, and even that maybe is somewhat phony. But I think that with everything that they did, they kind of went all in for this year. And I think losing in the divisional round should probably be a disappointment. It should probably be seen as not a successful season for this team. Just my opinion based on what I have seen and what I know about them. And kind of the things that they did both in the offseason and the trades that they made during the season, which is rare. You don't typically see a lot of big trades at the deadline, and the Rams were involved in a few. So I think for them to not at least make the conference championship has to be considered a failure. But we'll see. Quick look at next week's games and kind of where because I don't think I'm not going to do every week here. Just I'm going to throw in other stuff other than football probably for the next couple episodes. But Cincinnati at Tennessee, I think Tennessee should win that game. I would actually, if you had to tell me now the Patriots are out, who would you like to see most win the Super Bowl? I think it's the Titans for me. I think it's a good story if they do it. That team has been through the ringer with injuries, and through it all, they still managed to be the number 1 seed in the AFC. They lost their premier offensive threat for most of the season, and he's coming back for the playoffs. And to go without a player like Derrick Henry, who has been such an important part of that offense for the last several years, and to perform like they did down the stretch, is a testament to how good the Titans are as a team. They are getting healthy at the right time, and I think that they are going to be really hard to remove from this playoffs. So if if I had to put money on it, I would say the Titans are going to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. Would I be surprised if they don't? No, because I think Kansas City has a good shot. It's possible that the Bengals could even knock them off next week. I think the Bengals are good. I don't think they're good enough. So I think we get the Titans, and the other AFC matchup is the Bills and the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are going to expose the Bills. I think the Bills were the beneficiary of playing an overrated Patriots team, which sounds awful for me to say, but while the Bills' offense is good, I don't think that their defense is good enough, and I think the Chiefs will be able to do more against the Bills' offense, obviously, than the Patriots did, which isn't saying much because they did nothing. So I think we get Tennessee and the Chiefs in the AFC Conference Championship, and again, maybe this is me voting more with my heart than my head, but I would like to. I think the Titans. I think the Titans go to the Super Bowl. I think it's a great story if they do. I like Mike Vrabel a lot. Obviously, former Patriots player as their coach, and I just think for what they've gone through this season, for them to be in the position they are and to make a run in the playoffs, I think would be fun. Over on the NFC side, San Francisco at Green Bay. I think the 49ers get smoked. I think the Packers just stomp them. I could be wrong, and the 49ers can make a game out of it, but I think they're going to be very overmatched in that game. I think the Packers are really dangerous, and as much as I don't like Aaron Rodgers, I think it's hard to look at that game and see anything other than the Packers advancing. Again, it's the NFL, anything can happen, but I think the Packers win. The other game is the winner of tonight's game between the Cardinals and the Rams going to Tampa Bay to play the Bucks. And I don't think it matters who wins tonight's game. I think Tampa Bay wins that game. I will say that I think if it's the Rams, it'll be a better game than if the Cardinals win. I think the Bucks will handle the Cardinals well, and the Rams can maybe give them a run for their money. But I think either way, I think the Bucks win, and we're looking at Tampa Bay and Green Bay in the NFC Championship game. And I think that's tough to call. I think on paper, which the games are not played, but I think Green Bay has the advantage in that game, but it's not a big advantage. So that's where I think kind of the Final Four will be. I think it'll be, Titans and the Chiefs in the AFC, Packers and the Bucks in the NFC, and I guess if I have to go out on a limb, I would say it's going to be the Titans and the Packers in the Super Bowl, and hopefully the Titans would win that. But yeah, that's my overview look at it now on January 17th after most of the first round games have been played. So I am not a prognosticator, so please don't wager any money based on what I just said. But anyways, so I think that's pretty much going to cover everything. I went way longer than I thought I would. I was like looking at this going, I'm doing this solo, and I'm like, how am I going to get an hour? And I went over an hour and a half. So holy cow, I talked a lot. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it. As usual, just the usual shill job here at the end. If you're interested in more of my content, you can watch me on Twitch every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday evening. I start at 5 o'clock Eastern Time, twitch.tv/Aurethious. All of my links are either on screen if you're watching this or going to be in the description if you're listening to the audio on Spotify. You You can follow me on Twitter. It's at Aurethious on Twitter. I'm trying to tweet a little bit more about things that are other than, hey, I'm streaming. So I'm going to try and get better at that. So if you're interested, you can check me out on Twitter, follow me there. And as always, you can join us on the Ion Game Corner Discord server. And it's a lot of fun. A bunch of my friends are doing some fun stuff on Twitch, some stuff on YouTube. We have game nights. We have organized game stuff, mostly for Pokemon right now, but hopefully other stuff in the mix as well. So join us on the Discord server. It's a lot of fun. So that is it. So that's enough. I talked a lot. I need to stop talking and get some water. So thank you all. This was fun. I don't know if I'm going to do a lot of these live on Twitch. I think if the situation presents itself, and I think it's going to oftentimes depend on who I'm with, when we have a chance to record. If it happens to fall during one of my stream times, then we'll do it during my stream times. And also what we're talking about. So obviously, probably, hopefully, more gaming related stuff on Twitch, since I think that's where more of the interest is going to be. But again, it's not going to be the primary way. It just worked out this way this week. So, but thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you next time on the Arena of Aurethious.